You guys know I've always played Alliance. Alliance has been my thing. But I will say, back in the day, back in the vanilla days, Thrall I actually thought was a badass. He was always a badass leader to me. He was a badass orc. His blacked out armor was really cool. But he softened up a lot over the years, and it just made me like him a little bit less. But is Thrall returning as war chief in the new faction war? I don't know what the hell Doran's talking. A new faction war? There ain't no faction war. What is he talking about here? Now, Doran is the teller of truths. So we have to see what truths has he found in Thrall returning as war chief.
Do you think it's stupid that the Alliance is currently ruled by one High King?
By the way, side note, we all know that Thrall is actually Chris Metzen in the game, and it's very interesting to hear that Chris Metzen came back to Blizzard and said, like, I don't want to be the leader. I just want to kind of take over in a side role here, and now he's the leader. So I wonder, is Thrall going to be the same way? He came back and said, I don't want to be war chief. I want to be a side guy. And then all of a sudden he has to be war chief again.
Well, the
Wouldn't be
Horde
surprised.
is currently being ruled by like 13 different people, from the Volpira to the Draktyr, despite the fact that the guy that actually created a Horde, Thrall, is currently the lead character of the saga that just began. Well, that is almost certainly going to change soon, as the faction conflict is coming back, as it was stated by Blizzard in a recent interview. Even more importantly, Thrall is really just a personification of Chris Metzen. I mean, just like Thrall, how he retired.
I did not pre-watch this video, but anybody who's played WoW over the years knows this already. He is Chris Metzen with green skin, essentially.
Chris Metzen has also retired and returned completely unexpectedly because,
Do you guys remember when Chris Metzen's hairline was receding, and then he created the model of Thrall that had a receding hairline? Where the hell was that? Which expansion was that? Was that WoD Thrall model? I mean, he literally matched his hairline with Thrall. Yeah, right here. I mean, if that wasn't a tell, I don't know what the hell is. I mean, he literally gave an orc a receding hairline. Sight. How much more Chris Metzen can you get? Yeah. So there you go. He is Chris Metzen.
In the cinematic, we don't get to hide. The Horde Council was really just a temporary solution after the BFA that will have to be changed with the upcoming threats, and who better to rule the Horde than the guy that actually created the entire faction from nothing. Actually playing WoW on your phone is now possible with Awesome, this video sponsor. It allows you to control your desktop from your phone completely free, which is perfect for checking in on your WoW characters when you're away from the keyboard. It's super easy to use. Just click my link in the description, download the PC and the phone app, and just connect them. The free version is great as you can control your desktop, but the real deal is the game version with custom keyboards for various games such as WoW, with great FPS and sound as well. Make sure to use my code Doran to get 7 days completely free, only for the first 200 people. They also got a smart plug to turn off your PC at any time, as well as hot sales with up to 40% off on Pro and game versions.
No, they just reached out to me.
Awesome.
Yeah, Austin sponsors me as well. You can use code Samiccus. And no, it wasn't because of Doran, but maybe they saw me react to one of his videos, but they just reached out offhand.
So when you think of the Horde, you really think of Thrall. Really, if it wasn't for Thrall, almost certainly
It's
the
pretty
Horde
cool. You
would
can do
not
the
be
free
a
trial and check it out.
Originally,
Great.
the Horde was this Burning Legion puppet that came to invade Azeroth, demonic, but Thrall formed a superpower from the remnants of this catastrophe. We could really talk about an alternate reality on what would happen if Thrall was not a thing, but almost certainly the orcs would remain within the camps, or they would really turn out to be a local threat like the ogres all over Azeroth. The Darkspear would probably be wiped out, or almost certainly remain as an insignificant force, and very likely the Tauren or Kalendor would get defeated by the Centaur. In turn, the Forsaken will almost certainly get overwhelmed by the forces of the Alliance in the Eastern Kingdoms, and the whole world of Azeroth would look a whole lot different.
Damn, he's kind of right. I mean, Thrall's coming to power really did. You know, it saved a lot of races. Basically, all the Horde races were saved by Thrall. Yeah, Green Jesus. There you go.
The fact that Thrall eventually
lives up to the
abandoned
name.
his post changed everything, and this was really a bit of a weird decision. He decided to help save the world as a shaman, and he felt like he could do more than as the war chief of the Horde, but the fact that he put Garrosh in charge changed everything, and really ultimately led the
By the way, I agreed with Garrosh. I totally agree. When he left Garrosh to be in power before he was ready, he just fucking abandoned the Horde so he can go on his emotional shopping spree and figure out what the hell was going on with himself. That was a bad move on his part. That was his fault. And during the Makura, like literally Garrosh is telling him that. He goes like, you fucked up. You done left me with all this shit to clean up. You took a shit in the throne room and then just left. And I had to clean all your shit up. Yeah, he was right. He was right. Garrosh did nothing wrong, guys. Man was just trying to make a more powerful Horde.
to multiple civil
Green
wars that
Messiah.
you can feel up to this day. Still, Thrall didn't just turn into a hermit, he had actually returned on multiple occasions. In fact, he was very close to becoming the war chief at the end of both the Siege of Orgrimmar and BFA, and let's be real, if he became war chief after Garrosh was defeated, we would have avoided a whole bunch of problems, almost certain. Now, here's the thing, people see Thrall in the new cinematic with the grey hair they had.
Like, obviously, I mean, you know, Garrosh did kind of fuck around with the Tauren a little bit, killing their leader and everything, although he didn't know that his weapon was poison. But I still say it's Thrall's fault. He put him in that position before he really taught him the political ends of things. Garrosh only knew war. That's all he knew how to do, and that's what he did. And he tried to use his ability to fight wars and to command wars and do these things to make the Horde better. That's all he was trying to do.
Known him
Blame
since
Thrall.
Warcraft 3, it's been nearly 25 years, and they think like he's this ancient character that is like way too old to be a war chief, like he should be retired. However, literally by all accounts, based on the timeline that we know of, he's currently at about 40 years of age, which is literally nothing. He's not even that older than Anduin, as Anduin is in his 20s. He's already retired multiple times and returned, and now, as a lead character for The War Within, he's almost certainly coming back, and I think he might finally realize that he needs to be in charge, as the 2 times he wanted to leave the mantle to someone else, it all just blew up in flames, and every time
You're right,
it
Gray.
was just worse. Now, why I think this is going to be the case is because the faction war is returning, as Blizzard confirmed in an interview, but
What?
we'll get to that in a bit. So this is really
What the hell? What interview is he talking about? They confirmed a faction war. How are we going to do a faction? We got cross-faction guilds. What's he talking about? Faction war.
a bit of a weird scenario.
Dorn
I
on
feel
some
like
kind
if
of
you asked
drugs?
random people that play WoW that are like half versed in the lore, I'm not sure they would be able to guess who is currently leading the Horde. I mean, sure, everyone knows that the Council is currently in charge, but can people really name every single one of the Horde leaders without looking at the wiki? While for the Alliance, on the other hand, everyone knows about Andy.
Honestly, I think Lorthamar is the best leader of the Horde right now. I think Lorthamar is the most qualified. He's dealt with the most shit, and well, you can, I guess that's you can say the others have dealt with some shit. I mean, one of them lost their dad, right, in Bane. But yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna say. If there's a second best, it'd probably be Bane. But I just feel like Lorthamar is the most qualified in terms of, you know, the things he's done. He's proven himself to be a pretty good leader, even with all the shit Illyria's done. He still allowed her to come back and visit her family in the recent comic we watched. He allowed her to visit the Sunwell, even though she almost got them all killed. Like, he's shown himself to be a pretty merciful and smart leader. I actually like him a lot.
Anduin and Turellian. The Horde Council is a bit weird and definitely an outdated concept at this point where the lore is and where the lore is heading. So you might remember BFA and the ending of this gigantic worldwide Horde versus Alliance conflict that was like the biggest faction conflict ever. It was ultimately a part of the Jailer's plan, of course, but
course,
really
everything
it
is.
all ended up in a truce, and this is something that a lot of people seem to forget. The war never really ended, and Blizzard never entirely properly wrapped it all up. The Alliance had won this war, but based on the cost and everything, they might as well have lost it. Now, the Chronicle Volume 4 book came out that kind of doubled down on this, and it also recapped the previous expansions, and it really said how the entire piece was really just a joke. A lot of people didn't take it seriously, and a lot of them felt the piece, the truce, was a huge injustice. Even the recent information from the War Within beta shows that a bunch of characters still hold resentment and think that the piece shouldn't have turned out the way it did. Now, this leads us to the context of the creation and why the Horde Council was even created in the first place. So, after Sylvanas was essentially a puppet of the Jailer, Garrosh failed, Vol'jin ended up being completely useless, they figured out no one in particular should rule the faction, and that in fact they should just get a council. However, this should have really just been a temporary solution until the Horde gets back on track, get back on their feet, they figure out a peace treaty, clear all the loose ends, and then someone is going to come in to solidify the leadership as the war chief of the faction. Really, this is very similar to real world history, how after
If I'm being honest, I don't think the Horde's going to go back to a war chief direction. I just don't. I think they've had too many follies, too many bad leaders, basically since Thrall, and they're just not. They're just not going to do it. They're going to stick with the council, which is less. It's, I don't know. It's less badass. I don't know what it is, but I don't see Thrall reascending. Maybe he takes on more of a leadership role from the orc side of things, but Overall,
A
they're going to
major
keep the
war, there
council.
would be a temporary form of government until there is some stability to create something concrete. At the time when this was happening, Thrall was actually present. Originally, he wanted nothing to do with this, he felt like he did everything in his power, then he went to Outland, but Varrock Saurfang had been through much more, he was much older than Thrall, and he sought him out, and we got the whole "we don't get to hide" scenario, which ultimately dragged Thrall into the war.
Yeah.
However, seeing that this
Literally, Chris Metzen's return to Blizzard. Same storyline.
exact same character was slain in a pretty dramatic way by Sylvanas.
Except Sourfang was the player base telling him, you don't get to let this game die. You better come back here and fix it. Look what they did in Shadowlands. You better get back here and fix this shit.
Thrall said he promised Saurfang he wouldn't become a war chief, and he didn't, of course, and then we got the council. However, keep this in mind, since then, it has been quite a bit of time. First, we got the Shadowlands, we got a 5-year time skip between Shadowlands and Dragonflight, now we're getting a war within, which is another year or two, so really, it's been between 5 and 10 years since then, and let's really look at the status quo where we are. The Horde is still in this type of a temporary solution, led by a council of like a dozen people, when no one can really make a final word type decision, while the Alliance also has a council of sorts, but it is ruled by a High King. Now, this brings us to the upcoming faction conflict I had previously mentioned.
What is he
So I
talking
feel
about?
like no one is really talking about this for some reason, and it didn't really turn into big news within the community, but it is actually big news. A few months back, we got an interview with a few lead developers, and they just outright confirmed that a faction war is going to be happening soon. They didn't say we will get BFA or another massive conflict all over Azeroth,
Really?
but the gist of it is that while some characters will remain
What does this say? Philosophy allowing players to play together primarily. Okay. Maria teased that things might not always stay peachy between the Horde and Alliance, even if the philosophy is allowing players to play together. She said, I don't think we want to get rid of the faction identity at all, Maria emphasized. I think that's important. And I know that things that happen later in the War Within will delve into some of that. But at the heart of it, the philosophy is more about friends being able to play with each other. We want to make sure that the stories do still show that tension between the Horde and Alliance, and there's certainly potential for tension, right? We've seen some of the Forsaken and Gilneas recently. They don't love each other. The factions have to cooperate in times where they are needed by necessity, not because they love each other. They unite, and then they always fall out. I think that it's safe to bet that you're not going to stay friendly. You know individuals may stay friendly, but maybe not factionally. Okay. So there is... I call him the truth teller for a reason, guys. You don't believe me? Look at that. He did tell the truth. Yeah. So, I mean, faction divides could certainly happen, and faction conflicts can certainly happen, with your guild still being aligned because, hey, you guys became friends even though you're opposite factions. That's fine. So I do hope they play into this. And I actually think it could be Tyrellian, could be somebody else, some bad leader on the... I think they're going to make the Alliance be a bit more of a baddie and do something that fucks up the whole, cooperation between the Horde and Alliance at some point. Also, Xal'atath, we already saw, in the recent cinematic, she's playing with people's heads, right? She literally got Queen Ansurek to kill her mom. So I'm sure she's going to start doing some whispers in some of the minds of the Alliance and Horde leadership to get them to turn on each other, create chaos. I could see that happening, totally.
friendly, the Horde and the Alliance never really get to have real peace. It always erupts into something, and this time it will be no different. According to this, it is hinted that something will be happening at the end of War Within that is going to be probably similar to another Radgate type event where something happens between the factions. The entire characters will be friendly. I think it's just an explanation for the cross-faction features as they are a necessity for gameplay reasons. I don't honestly expect a major war, but something where we are fighting the main threat, which is going to be the Void, but we are going to be separate factions with separate bases, and we aren't going to exactly be friendly. I think Blizzard...
I think, like I said before, it's got to be Xal'atath. Xal'atath's going to play on the faction divide a little bit, and she's going to get us to do some messed up shit to each other.
Make you figure it out.
The whole third faction thing, I just don't think that's ever going to happen. It's been talked about for a long time, a third faction in WoW. But I don't see them dividing things again. That seems highly unlikely. Even though could come up in the lore, but I just don't see it happening.
outright merging the factions into one hasn't really been the best thing, as a lot of people still identify with the Horde and the Alliance and they like the faction pride. The beta itself already started setting this up with multiple dialogues for major characters where they aren't exactly too happy with the other faction and how peace turned out in the past. This probably means that we will get like local wars or skirmishes, and this means that the faction will have to start secluding themselves. Now, think about this.
It could happen. Look, you said it could happen in the Midnight expansion, Jamal. Who said that? Johnny? Yeah, look, here's the Midnight expansion. Certainly is going to have some faction stuff going down because we know we're going to unite the elves, right? And there's freaking elves on both sides. We already know that. You got your blood elves on the Horde side. You got your void elves and your night elves. You also have the Suramar elves, whatever the hell they're called.
To this realm.
Soupy, thank you for the sub on YouTube. Welcome to our Scourge. So you got multiple elf basically groups on both sides. And if they're gonna come together as is described in Midnight and basically turn Silvermoon into an elf hub city, there might be some faction things going on there before they finally unite. And those faction things might be caused by Xal'atath.
If it really came to blows, the Alliance is really at an unfair advantage with a High King that can make almost all decisions, while the Horde has a council that is ruled by like over a dozen people. It gets even more ridiculous than that, as some races don't even have their own leaders. So the Forsaken are ruled by yet another council, and then this council makes a decision to have one vote on the actual Horde.
Callie Amenethil's been kind of in the background. Yeah, she could cause some faction conflict because she's still Alliance aligned. And now she's one of the leaders of the Forsaken. Yeah, we'll see how that plays out.
Council, imagine being in the midst of war and a world-threatening scenario and you got like 13 different people to agree on one thing. I think this type of a threatening scenario will get the council to vote for a war chief, a war leader that will have to unite the faction and lead it in times of dire need. Now, realistically, can you think of any character better right now to lead the Horde as a war chief than Thrall? He obviously returned from retirement, he's back to saving the world, and he's not just trying to live a peaceful life like he was in the past. He was in the opening cinematic of the World Soul Saga. He obviously was seeking out Anduin, who was also trying to have some alone time to essentially remind him that we don't get to hide and that Azeroth needs us.
Right.
Also, there is an entire scenario with him losing his elemental powers, and we don't really know if it returns, but it is possible that instead of being a shaman, he's going to actually focus on being a war chief. However, this is
got all this limp dick shit going on. Thrall can't control the elements. Anduin got no light. I mean, man, performance issues for all these guys.
So all in-game lore. I feel like the biggest hint for Thrall leading is the fact that Chris Metzen has returned as the lead story guy. This isn't exactly speculation. I mean, everyone knows that Thrall is really his own reflection in the game. A reflection that he might have taken a bit too far a few times with the entire Green Jesus thing. However, he started retiring Thralls just a few years before he actually retired, which means he was thinking about retiring himself from Blizzard, and he probably never figured out he would return. However, just as he has returned back to lead the company, Thrall has also suddenly made a big return as one of the lead characters. Chris Metzen obviously said he was back for good, and he's the one that is working on all the 3 expansions, so I honestly feel like Thrall returning back to lead the Horde would be like a personification of Chris returning to lead Blizzard and how he doesn't get to hide. He kinda created Warcraft lore and it got a life of its own, just like how Thrall created a Horde, and despite the fact that both of them retired, they always had to come back. Of course, a little bit of speculation on the real world side, however, from the gameplay side it definitely makes sense. If it comes to faction war, the Horde will need a leader. I know a lot of people are all about everyone having a vote and they don't want to have a dictator having a single word over the entire faction, but the Alliance doesn't exactly have a dictator. They're ruled by the High King, but they all have a vote of their own, and I just don't think it is possible for the Horde to
I mean, we saw the Night Elves completely basically ignore Anduin during the wars, right? During BFA and everything else that went down, the Night Elves, they were like, screw you, Anduin. We're going to fight, we're going to do the things we want to do, and you can deal with your shit however you want to deal with it. So he is right. There is a supreme leader, I guess, of the Alliance, and that would be whoever sits on the throne room in Stormwind. But the factions, or the races, are kind of allowed to do their own thing for the most part.
Be efficient without a war chief, and who better to rule than the guy that created a faction and was with it through thick and thin. Thank you for watching. Check out the video on Xal'atath getting a new body from Old God Remains of Khazad by clicking on the screen, and check out the video on ancient training methods on the second channel by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.
Nice. I sat on the high throne of Stormwind. Does that make me a leader? No, it makes you a usurper. You piece of shit. Yeah, so Doran the Truth Teller, you know, he told some truths there. There actually will be faction conflicts, it seems, based on that interview. So we'll have to see whether or not the Horde and Alliance, you know, how that all plays out. I really think if there is a faction conflict, Xal'atath is going to be the reason for it.